rather than taking out material unless it's completely out of date, I just keep adding. So the idea is more to be discussion based, and that actually sets the tone for any midterm questions you'll get from me. They're not about memorization, that's not a good way to learn. It's about testing your critical thinking, applying technologies within your specific context, whether it's medicine, engineering, computer science. We see every range of backgrounds from within this class. I've been teaching for 13 years now, which makes me feel old. And basically the idea is to see that you can take the concepts brought forward from my lectures and apply them critically and analytically, and that's why you'll find that my questions tend to be longer. Part of the take-home exam, and it's usually a 24-hour take-home exam, it's not an in-class open book exam. So that is the framework with which I want you to apply to my lectures and my questions. And there will be a lot of thought experiments and a lot of imagination. Speaking of which, we're going to get to our first thought experiment. So I want you to put on your imagination hats, your time travel machines, and fast forward to 11 years from now. It is year 2035. You are in grade school, and you are a kid named Billy, and you have your day off from school. So what do? You decide to play computer games. So you slip on your immersive reality headset and you go and do what any other kid playing video games does, and you blast some bad guys. And at the end of the day, you've nuked all of the invaders, and in fact, what has turned out that you've been doing all along is you have actually been targeting cancer cells in an actual medical patient. So this is a far-fetched scenario, but basically I want you to realize that even the most far-fetched scenarios can be closer than we think. And this is a totally hypothetical example, not one that I've seen come to reality yet, but you will see more and more what I hope are mind-blowing concepts to you over the course of my lectures. And if you don't, well then I'll have to work harder to show you what's truly on the horizon of technology and medicine today. So this is the game you've been playing, the Terminator, and that kind of sets the tone for today's lecture. So we're going to talk all about engineering tomorrow, fostering a culture of innovation and disruption, and how we get there, and the frameworks in which we operate both within technological innovation as well as medicine. So by the end of this lecture, I want you to know the what, the why, the how, and also how that applies to your context. So what is a sense of the emerging trends and technologies that will impact the future of innovation, medicine, and medical innovation? To talk about the why, what are the greatest challenges, and contextualize it. And this actually changes from year to year, because for many years it was all very pandemic focused for obvious reasons. This year I think we're going to focus on different emerging technologies. Talk about how we develop an innovation mindset, how we can teach ourselves to think exponentially, and then how this applies to your own background. Okay, so 3 questions. What is innovation? If I were to ask you to answer that question, feel free to raise your hand, yell an answer. This is all very you focused. So what is innovation? Yeah?
Finding an alternate solution to a problem.
Perfect, finding an alternate solution. Okay, anyone else?
Solution that hasn't been discovered by anyone else and makes it better progress. More
Novel
progress.
solutions, ideally better. That would be great. Yeah, perfect. Any other suggestions?
Developing current solutions to make them better and more efficient.
Building upon existing processes. Excellent. Okay. So the second question is, why does it matter? Okay, and if you were to answer that question, anyone, why does the innovation matter?
Our needs change over time.
Needs change. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Like making the process more seamless would prevent wasting resources.
Yep, more efficiency. Okay. And we'll move on to the third one. And then how does one innovate? So that one you can keep in your back pocket for now. We're actually going to get to that. Okay. So this is not a trick question. What is this? Not a trick question. Again, promise.
Pop bottle.
Yeah, it's the bottom. Okay, second not trick question. What do we use it for?
Drinking.
Drinking or storing things? Okay, so here's now the hopefully not a trick question. What else can it be used for?
For the plants, for flowers.
Yeah, as a planter for flowers.
Hitting someone.
I'm gonna step over here, sure. Okay, what else can it be used for?
So that use like for
Good.
floating when you're building something and you want it
Okay.
to float and stuff.
Staying afloat at sea, perfect. I haven't heard that one before.
I could build like a filtration system in it and camping.
Perfect, filtration system. Okay, these are all great ideas. I've heard some new ones I haven't heard before, so nothing. Okay, not that I encourage that. But this is a perfect example of answering our first question, what is innovation? So yeah, it can be used as a planter, it can be used as a chandelier, it can be used as a bird feeder, jewelry store, pencil case kit, art installation, and piggy bank, to name a few. So innovation can be a way of repurposing an existing solution for novel applications, or we heard over here earlier, it can be a new way of building upon existing processes to make processes more efficient. So for the longest time, I used to have a beef with the Heinz ketchup bottles because they lean into this. For them, it's a feature, not a bug. They talk about having to really work to get your ketchup out of the bottle. But really, to me, that's inefficient design because by virtue of the design of the bottle, in most bottles, you're not being able to access the whole entire 100% of the product that you're paying for. So if you add that up over millions and billions of bottles being sold every year, that's actually a lot of wastage. So there was actually a concept out of MIT Media Lab. This is a little bit old now, but what if we just redesign the bottle to actually have better adhesive properties or decreased adhesive properties between ketchup and the bottle surface so that we could access the entirety of the product. So here's an existing adhesive properties between ketchup versus a newly engineered material, and look, now the entirety of the product can slide out. So that's just an example of doing things differently. And going back to Google Slides, yeah, okay.
Let's bring right now former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner.
See that?
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, and we're going to go back to view, slideshow, okay. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more into this discussion, but so in case you don't know who I am, I thought I would introduce myself. So I have a variety of different hats, depends on the day, depends where I am, what I'm doing. So basically, I am a commercial astronaut. I am an assistant clinical professor in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry here. I'm a rural emergency and primary care physician. I do a lot of space medicine research. I head up the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences Space Medicine Group. I'm advisor to numerous startup and commercial space medicine and technology innovation companies. And I also serve as the VP of Immersive Medicine with Sonic Technologies, which will become important during our Immersive Health and Technologies lecture. Anytime there's a commercial interest, I will try to be very, very explicit that I actually am working for this company or there's an interest there. In case you are a written learner, those are all of, I think, most of my written affiliations. And I'm also a speaker with the National Speakers Bureau. I don't think that made it on there. So that's me. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to take it. But I also want to know who I'm speaking to every year because the makeup of the class varies. We've had everyone from really interested high school students in India who just wanted to audit the class to spine fellows from Nepal. So we'll start at this end. What I want to know is your name. And I will ask you this numerous times through the course. My apologies, I'm bad with names. What your discipline is, and what year you are, and what's brought you to this course. So go ahead.
Mariam Al-Azari, fourth year Bachelor in Science, and I'm teaching this course I think last year.
Yes, we met here next year. Thank you.
I'm excited to be back.
Perfect. Welcome back. Thank you.
I'm Rajin, and I'm in first year of biomedical engineering, course-based masters. And I took this class because myself, I'm interested in the area of regenerative medicine and generally whatever that is to like the future of the medicine looks like. So,
Perfect. Welcome.
My name is Ella. I'm a fourth year undergrad in bio. What brought me to this course, I hope to have a career in medicine, but I'm also interested in technological innovations in pharmaceuticals.
Perfect. And so you were fourth year?
Bio.
Perfect. Okay, next.
Hi, I'm Sarjana. I'm in my third year of my Bachelor of Science in Psychology. And what brought me to this course was I saw some of Dr. Solaz's materials and I just thought it was something really interesting that I hadn't learned about before.
Perfect, welcome.
My name is Lee, and I'm a fourth year also in sciences. I'm double majoring in bio and psych, so I have a bit of a background in both. And what brought me here was just like the interest in the topics discussed, and also just my overall interest in like science fiction and medical related things since I was a child. So.
Perfect. Well, I like to hear that because one of the things that we'll harp on, especially during the space medicine lecture, is that science fiction is closer than we think. So, next.
Hi, I'm Shi. I'm the second year graduate student, and from the Department of Biochemistry. But my first program was in the Department of Medicine. I take this course because I think it might be a very interesting course, and like space medicine is the first time I knew this term, and I wanted to see something new in medical field, not only patients, not only mice model, not only cells. I wanted to see something new. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Daniel. I'm in my fourth year in psychology. And the reason I took this course is because I actually have a cousin who's studying AI in the UK. And so, yeah, over the summer, I saw him and we had a little conversation, and I kind of realized that it's nice to think about health sciences for what we know now, but also it's really key to understand what it would look like in the future, and everything's changing so rapidly. So I kind of wanted to move away from like the traditional understanding physiology and everything and see what's more perspective. So.
Perfect. And as you'll see during this lecture, it's no longer a future conversation, it's a now conversation. Perfect. And last but not least, we just want to know your name, what you're studying, and what brings you to this course.
Sounds good. My name is Hish. I'm doing my master's in modeling, data, and prediction. It's under math and stats department. And the reason I'm taking this is because I build basically like machine learning and AI models. So like I want to know like how that will impact us in the future, you know. So and also like I want to be able to like build ethical AI models.
Perfect. Okay, great. We have a slide dedicated to that, so stay tuned. Okay, so we talked about what is innovation. We heard answers like novel applications of existing solutions versus building on processes to make them more streamlined, more efficient, versus new ways of doing things. So we're just going to take a grand sweeping tour, not necessarily medical, of emerging innovations that exist today. So we talked about building on existing processes. Dating myself here, not all of you will recognize this, but talking about building on operating systems and software, going from Windows 95, which, believe it or not, at one point people lined around the block to get access to Windows 10, now 11, to looking at the evolution of the smartphone, which started off as a MP3 audio listening device to actually phone with functionality, and then building upon generations of smartphones, better cameras, being able to do our banking on it, being able to navigate from day-to-day life, being able to maintain connectivity. This is the era of flying cars. When I first started giving this lecture, there was one example I would cite, the company TerraFusia. Now there is actually a whole host of flying car companies out there that are both building hybrid cars that can double as airplanes, that can also drive on the road, but also working with regulatory bodies like the FAA to be able to actually build, to legally and safely operate these flying cars. So we'll see if this shows up, but here's an example of a model that was debuted at CES. So these are, again, new companies, so their landscape is changing. If you were to map out over time between the early 2000s versus how many flying car companies out there, there's actually quite a few. Okay. So this is also the era of new technologies, I don't know how new they are now, but for drones. So drones for food delivery, drones for fun, drones for photography, drones for Amazon delivery, and as we'll see, drones for medication and aid delivery. So this is also the era of making things smarter that we didn't know should be smart. So this is out of Stanford Innovation Labs. This is a smart ottoman that decides that you need to be more comfortable and it's going to make you more comfortable. So it's the idea of not only new processes and applying new ways of thinking, but also existing, introducing previously parallel technologies into a way that they intersect. And that's a new way of thinking that we don't think about too often in this era of AI, immersive technologies, digital health, social media. It's the era of 3D printing, so 3D printing for art, 3D printing for food, so you can have your face and eat it too. 3D printing for biological processes, for cellular processes, for organ processes, organ printing processes, 3D printing in space. So Made in Space was the first company to 3D print on the space station in 2009. Since then, we have now, as of last year, we've entered the era of biological printing in space. So we've seen companies like Redwire successfully print knee menisci in space. You'll learn about why that's important on our space medicine lecture, to printing 3D printed cardiac cells on a chip to be able to see how cardiac cells respond to the spaceflight environment, and also 3D printing for prosthetics. So this is a turtle with pyramidalism, and they were just 3D printed a shell to be able to just live their best turtle lives. Okay, material science. Here's an example of novel applications in material science. I'm just going to play this video for you. So, not necessarily related to medicine, but related to climate health. We know that oil spills are environmental disasters. They can affect marine life, aquatic life, and also impede the marine ecosystem. So typically trying to clean up a oil spill is a no small feat. It is expensive, and we just don't have any foolproof, successful ways of doing it. So here's a novel material that is lightweight, that can soak up many times its weight. So it's a polyurethane or polyamide foam. Its adhesive properties are such that it is attracted to oil, and it can soak up 10 to 100x times its weight. And reusable. And it can also make use of the oil that is soaked up in it. So just to kind of give you an idea of the landscape of how things are changing. Go back to our view. Okay. And then we talked about, sorry, I should have warned you guys there's graphic photos in this. Surprise, there's graphic photos in this. Novel ways of thinking how we build on existing processes. So this is the case study, the link is here. This is from 2015. There was a factory worker in China who lost both of his hands in a factory accident. So upon examination, the stumps that were left over were found to be healthy and viable, as well as so were the hands. And so this had never been done before, but while allowing the stumps to heal, they actually grafted the hand onto the foot so as to keep it viable, keep it with a blood supply, so as to be able to eventually retransplant the hands. And so this is building on existing processes, because once upon a time, there was, if you had an amputation, your options for prosthetics were a hook. Now in this era of prosthetics, we have increasingly refined prosthetics that have increased degrees of freedom that can mimic what the hand can do with respect to degrees of freedom, sometimes even having haptic feedback. And then when I was in medical school, about the time I started teaching in this course, the world's first double hand transplant was performed, and now this kind of built on this process about 4 years after that, about doing a delayed hand transplant in a delayed fashion while keeping the hand viable in a very unusual but novel fashion. This one hit the headlines in the past 3 years mid-pandemic, so we know that organ supply, organ donors have been able to provide those in need of organ transplants. There's a huge mismatch between supply and donation, and so if you, this was a novel first xeno transplantation, so pig to human heart transplant. So this was the first time it was done. Unfortunately, the patient passed not too long after, but at the time it was deemed a successful transplant. Okay, bringing the space side a little bit. This is also an era of new access to novel platforms, and we'll talk about why that's important a little bit later. So this is the time of access to commercial space flight. So once upon a time, the only way to be an astronaut was to go through a space agency selection, through the Canadian Space Agency, NASA, European Space Agency, etc. Since 2021, we have literally seen the rise of commercial space flight, both through orbital and suborbital spaceflight. So Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin both launched their suborbital space flights. It's where you go up and down on the same day mission, just on a really high trajectory. And since then, both have continued to fly. So my mission will be slated for 2026. And this is different from a orbital mission, which is notably a launch in continuous orbit, which you would see with the International Space Station. Okay, so as we finish this tour here, the point about this is having access to novel environments like the weightless environment, like the microgravity environment, can also give us access to new types of science. And I won't go too much into that because we're going to spend more time talking about that in the space medicine lecture. Okay. A couple more technologies that I want to bring to your attention is metaverse. So that is an extension of the immersive world. So we're going to have a dedicated lecture on that. Briefly, immersive talks about any technology that provides us with an environment that takes us out of our physical environment through virtual, digital, or mixed means through which we can have digital overlays on our physical environments. Blockchain technologies. So we hear about this in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, but it's also a novel form of creating more secure and original ways of protecting key data, which is super important in healthcare. Okay, so that's a brief whirlwind tour of the diaspora of emerging technologies in 2024. Let's bring it back towards medicine for a little bit, and let's talk about operating frameworks that may guide how we think about medicine. Okay, so actually, I want to get your take on this. If I were to ask you to define medicine or health, what would you say? If someone were to ask you to give a quick 10-second reply to that.
I would say practices that improve or that fix any issues that we're seeing in health.
Okay, so fixing issues in human health. Okay, anything else?
I think something that heals the mind or the body.
Okay,
Like,
so healing. Okay. Any this side of the room.
Improving quality of living.
Improving quality of living. So it's very interesting that all three of the answers were given were looking for problems to fix, but the World Health Organization said it's not simply the absence of disease, it's the presence of complete physical, mental, social, and I would add sexual well-being. So I heard this in my second year of medical school, and my mind was blown because Western medicine, we kind of have the refractory approach of saying, okay, once it's broken, we'll fix it. And now there's more of a push in the 2000s to work on preventative measures to stop us from getting sick in the first place. And there's a lot of opportunities there for monitoring, for personalized monitoring, which is why I bring this to your attention. Okay, next framework. So this is from the National Institute of Health in the US. The 5 Ps with a bonus 6 Ps. So they talk about predictive, personalized, precise, preventative, participatory, point-of-care health. So what that means is earlier detection, figuring out who's more likely to get cancer, who's more likely to get heart disease, being able to tailor drug administration, drug dosages to a particular patient, making it more personalized, more precise, focusing on preventative care, so we just talked about that, so not just curing cancer, not just screening for cancer, but preventing it altogether. Participatory, it used to be kind of, patient said comes to me with an issue, I say take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning, versus now saying we talk about a shared decision-making model of medicine, making sure that patients have ownership over their own health, which can have impacts on outcomes. And then point of care, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the space medicine lecture, but that means being able to, for example, have access to a rapid strep test at a pharmacy, so you know whether you truly have strep and if that needs antibiotics. Okay, this is the CanMed's competencies. I think there were a few here who wanted to go into medicine later in their careers, so don't be surprised if this sometimes comes up in the interview. But the CanMed's competencies are basically scholar, professional communicator, collaborator, leader, health advocate. Those are the components of what makes a medical expert. So it's not simply enough to be book smart. You need to be able to communicate what you want your patient to know. You need to be able to collaborate with other specialties. You need to be able to advocate for change when the system isn't working for you or your patient. And you need to be a leader. And you also need to, especially in this day and age when medical guidelines are changing so quickly with the rate of increasing research, you need to be able to keep abreast of learning of new guidelines, which is why we say medicine is lifelong learning. So this is from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. This is from the World Economic Forum. It's about a year old now. And they talk about 4 guiding principles that guide how they think about healthcare technologies. So they talk about smart care that will improve patient outcomes. So that's kind of analogous to predictive medicine. Care anywhere. So you'll see that when we talk about the principles that guide universal healthcare in Canada. Empowered healthcare, there's the participatory aspect of it, and then intelligent health enterprises. So basically they're talking about solutions that will enable not just healthcare workers, but also institutions to maximize processes and inefficiency when we're dealing with so much data and increasing volumes and acuity of patients. Okay, so I promised we talk about the principles of healthcare in Canada. Okay, so we talk about universal healthcare, but that comes down to these 5 key components. Okay, so we talked about healthcare anywhere in the last slide. That's portability, comprehensiveness. So it's not just you only have access to healthcare for one bodily system. It's all the entire body. Hopefully someday dental and vision will be fully included in there. Universality. So if for all Canadians anywhere in Canada, that includes access. So if you go to Newfoundland and you have a medical emergency, your healthcare here will still cover you. And public administration in that you are not paying out of pocket if you have a medical emergency, that is on the system. Okay, pillars of medical ethics. So again, this will come up in medical school. Basically, first, the simplest way to think about this is do no harm. Okay, if you're not sure, anytime I'm in the emergency room and I have a patient and I'm not sure about what the next step is, first of all, do no harm. Second of all, there's this running joke in medicine that says MD stands for make decision. So it's also learning about to think critically and make good decisions, but you're respecting your patient's autonomy, their ability to make decisions for themselves unless that is compromised, and there's principles that guide how you think about that. Non-maleficence, not doing anything that will actively harm your patient. Beneficence, acting in the best interest of your patient, and then doing right by your patient, justice. And so non-maleficence, you can even go further, and what makes up how we justify doing no harm to a patient, or how you prove you did harm to a patient, is proving you had a duty to the patient, proving that you did not do that duty to the patient, proving that the patient suffered direct harm as a result of your actions, and then there was direct damage. So those are the 4 Ds of non-maleficence. Okay. So those are the frameworks. So now let's talk about opportunities and problem spaces in medicine. And so don't think of these as at odds with one another, because today's problems can also be the new opportunity for innovation. Can someone give me a quick time check here? What time are we at? 2:34. 2:34, perfect. Really? That's it? Okay, perfect. I'm gonna talk lots then. Okay. Challenges in medicine. Okay, so to the surprise of no one, pandemics are still at the top of this list. And who's been aware, who's been following the news? What is the latest 2024 pandemic we have to worry about? So what are we calling it now?
Mpox.
Mpox, yeah, in this day and age. So I should update that slide. Okay, accessibility, healthcare system collapse. So we've seen this interesting thing, unfortunate phenomenon since the pandemic, where we're seeing increased acuity, increased volume, decreased healthcare availability, and it seems to be agnostic of the system. So definitely in Alberta, in Canada, we're seeing this. Definitely my patient acuities and volumes have gone up since the pandemic, but in talking with colleagues, whether they're part of a private model, US-based healthcare versus the NHS model in the UK, it seems to be a universal problem. Preventative care, so we talk about it, but we still need better, non-invasive predictive models of figuring out who is more likely to get breast cancer, who is more likely to suffer from dementia. How do we create interventions that will not do harm to the patient, but also be effective and cost effective, so that maybe the answer isn't a blanket screen every single 20-year-old Canadian, but maybe the answer is to screen every 20-year-old Canadian who has at least 2 first-degree members of their family with Alzheimer's disease. That's just a hypothetical. So monitoring. So when we talk about monitoring, it's easier in a hospital or an ICU when we have the infrastructure to let me look at a patient's vital signs, their blood pressure, their heart rate, their rest rate, their pulse ox, the temperature. But what about at home? And then how do we maintain the fidelity of that? How do we balance not having too much data to parse versus getting accurate alerts when something is truly wrong versus a false positive. So we see that a lot in the era of smartwatches, the amount of patients who come in with atrial fibrillation. During COVID, we were seeing a lot of patients whose home watches would tell them after COVID that their heart rate was accelerated, but they weren't feeling it and we weren't measuring it in the ER. So it's finding that balance between a good enough tool that balances false positives and negatives. Rural and remote care, this is something close to my heart because that's 100% of my practice. So if you were at a remote or rural site in Alberta, you do not have the same facilities as a tertiary care hospital here in Edmonton. We definitely don't have CAT scanners, we definitely don't have MRIs. I have at best an X-ray. I don't have 24/7 lab or X-ray technicians. I have to call them in. And that's a human being doing that, running around, so you have to be judicious about the resources. And then, interestingly enough, many of the labs I order will not be back same day, but would also guide my management if I had those results. So getting more point of care access when it comes to imaging, access to specialists, as well as blood work results is a huge challenge in remote care. 17 to 18% of the 38 to 39 million Canadians in this country live rurally. Antibiotic resistance, sock puppeting, we're going to talk about those in detail in the coming slides, as well as patient context and novel technologies. And then we're going to talk about drug repositioning in the context of drug configuration. And this also speaks to precision medicine, about drugs that can have specific longevity and pharmacodynamics and kinetics depending on the patient's own physiology. Okay, so we're going to blaze through these next slides because I want to spend a little bit more time on AI. So in 2021, this was the slide that we made up about emerging crises and opportunities. How do we make masks that will keep us safe? How do we both distribute, manufacture vaccines, and how do we do so in a way that the population will trust us? I don't think I need to remind everyone of how that went. In 2022, we saw new variants of COVID arise and trying to both keep people vigilant, keep people believing in the threat of COVID, as well as keep the newest vaccines keeping up with the newest variants of COVID. And then we had the joyful triple-demic in 2023 of COVID, flu, RSV. As someone working in the emergency rooms, that was not a fun time. And again, convincing people that there is a duty to maintain infection and prevention control measures, IPC. Earlier this year, there were some interesting tests in Europe where not only could you do a rapid swab at home for COVID, you could do that for influenza, RSV. And that was in the context of what we talked about earlier with overburdened healthcare systems. But we're going to be a little less doom and gloom, because what is the hot topic that we're all hearing about every single headline, every single news story when it comes to new technologies in general? AI, yes. Okay, so let's talk about AI applications in medicine. If you had your wish list, or even just using your imagination, what are potential solutions, applications for AI, ChatGPT, etc.? Yes.
Like statistical models mapping out how likely you are to contract certain diseases in certain areas.
Perfect. Prediction and parsing and prediction of large data sets, yes. Anyone else? Anyone? Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So this isn't a new concept. IBM was doing it before it was cool. And famously, so they created Watson, this artificial intelligence that was ideally supposed to be a diagnostic tool. Most famously, it went on to both win Jeopardy against champions, but also lose Jeopardy when it named, what did it do? What did it name as the capital of Canada? Didn't say Ottawa, it said Toronto. So AI is fallible. So where are we in 2024? So New England Journal of Medicine has, about a year ago, put out an article about the importance of AI in medicine, to the point where this year, NEJM has its own dedicated AI journal. That's how important it is. Here are the potential applications that have been listed. So there are actually products on the market now that can listen to my patient interaction, listen to me as I examine the patient, and can summarize that interaction and do my charting for me. That is amazing. I haven't used it yet, but I love the idea of that. There are programs that go a step further and can actually collate the entire spectrum from testing to results to communicating that to the patient, taking the doctor out of the loop. Less a fan of that because we know that, coming back to the Watson example, AI is fallible. Precision medicine, so we talked about creating more targeted therapies. We also, there's specific applications, for example, in triage, figuring out which patients are more likely to be sicker at the emergency desk for better cancer detection. And then image interpretation. So this isn't just diagnostic imaging. It's not just looking at a chest x-ray, a CT, and ultrasound, but it's also looking at rashes. Doctors are notoriously bad at looking at rashes unless you're a dermatologist, because typically we say it looks red and rashy. And so image interpretation extends to derm, ophthalmology, looking at pictures of, for example, retinas, optic nerves, figuring out what disease they are, histology, pathology, so Kim, it's coming for your job too. And then patient selection for trials, so that's where we talk about parsing the large data sets. We're going to talk about drug matching and repurposing and why that's important, but again, that requires incredible computational power when we look at the 3D configuration of drugs at the proteomics level, or the protein level. NEJM specifically mentioned health insurance coverage, less of a concern here in Canada, but both for the healthcare companies as well as for individual patients trying to navigate the healthcare companies. And then we talked about the data sets. So this isn't just New England Journal of Medicine. Here's what Harvard Medicine had to say about it, emerging as a trend. So they specifically talked about how we might engage with an AI, such as ChatGPT, and types of prompts we could generate. So anything from saying, these are my symptoms, what is the most likely diagnosis and treatment, what is a personalized treatment plan that this patient who is likely to adhere to based on their age and lifestyle. So an 18-year-old elite Olympic athlete may have a different treatment plan than a 64-year-old retiree. Looking at an x-ray to detect abnormalities, identifying risk factors for cancer, for heart attack, diabetes, stroke, cardiovascular disease, and then communication, which the medical system and healthcare professionals sometimes don't do a good job of being able to explain technical jargon in layman's terms as to what that means for the patient. So, pitfalls. We talked a little bit about this. We don't want, so Watson naming Toronto as the capital of Canada is entertaining, but now take a scenario that's analogous in medicine, looking at a histology slide and saying this isn't cancer when in fact it was. Looking at a viral diagnosis, a life-altering diagnosis, and saying it was negative. Who takes the responsibility in that case? If I take the human out of the system and someone launches legal action, who is responsible for that? So the regulatory framework needs to catch up with it. The reliability we just talked about. And then, is anyone here a Last Week Tonight John Oliver fan? Okay, have you seen the one where he covers AI and the potential of risks and biases? So there's a really important case study where they talk about how AIs have been trained in dermatology to recognize melanoma and talking about the pitfalls with that. And so number one, the AI started to call anything with a ruler more likely to be malignant because the data set was trained on skin lesions that had rulers measuring the size of it. That's an unintentional bias. Other places where biases come in is if we're training data sets, for example, again in dermatology, picking on the dermatologists here, on a certain type of skin type, so fair-skinned lesions, then that data set is not going to be necessarily generalizable to darker skinned lesions. So in dermatology, we classify these based on the Fitzpatrick scale. If you're Fitzpatrick 1, you're very, very fair-skinned, likely to sunburn, versus Fitzpatrick 6, very melanated, don't have the same sun sensitivity concerns. So if you were simply training your AI to recognize skin pathology in one half of that Fitzpatrick scale, you cannot argue that it's generalizable. Okay, so when we're talking about any novel technology, taking a step back from AI, we need to both recognize the potential for it, for making processes more efficient, for talking about novel applications, for addressing gaps in healthcare, but we also have to be aware of the land of unintended consequences and how this may adversely affect our patient populations, because remember, we're trying not to do any harm. So this may or may not tend to come up on the midterm. That is a hint. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Like this kind of model, who do this kind of model really wants to replace? That's to say, like when we create the bars, we wanted to replace the horse. Yeah, so how about this kind of model? Because like the procedure of the procedure for patients, the nurses can do this. Yeah, like the image reading, the MR, the CD scanning images, and the doctors can read it. So what does this model really want to replace to improve the efficiency?
It depends.
Especially when we don't have too much patients, like in rural areas. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting dilemma. So overall, both Harvard and New England Journal of Medicine and most physicians, including myself, will say the answer lies somewhere in between. If there's a tool that can make our lives easier, if there's a tool that can chart for me and I just have to proofread it, that's perfect. I would welcome that in my practice. If there is a tool that's proposing to take me out of the loop, what happens when I'm not there, I'm technically on call as the backup for the AI, and then the AI says this chest pain is heartburn, and in fact was a heart attack? Who's responsible there? So the answer probably lies somewhere in between. Just like we have surgical robotics in use in the operating room today, we don't let the robots operate independently for the same reasons, because humans are the ones who can make those split-second judgments. AI is not there yet. And also the liability has to rest somewhere. So one last example when it comes to thinking of different types of intelligence. So remember, we talked about innovation being different ways of looking at existing problems and using novel solutions. So we can talk about artificial intelligence, but what about non-human intelligence? So I love this case study. I've included the BBC link here. It's from 2015. But the question was, what if we had a better way of detecting and diagnosing breast cancer in pathology slides? And basically, they trained pigeons to recognize what breast cancer looked like on a pathology slide and rewarded the pigeons with birdseed. And basically, they were able to train a single pigeon to be able to be as good as a trained pathologist. And when they flock sourced the answer, having multiple pigeons review a slide, the pigeons were actually more accurate than a fully trained pathologist. And so it's an interesting case study because you might be asking yourself, what does the pigeon have that I don't? So